Okay. It's told me it was. All right, so I'm Danae. I'm going to be the chairperson this week. And we're going to be talking about a question or concept from this week's lectures, chapter 3. Does anyone want to start?
I had a question for during the patient ID lecture, he mentioned that if you image the wrong patient, you earn a UPA. And I don't know if I wasn't paying attention or what, but do you guys know what that stands for?
I don't remember seeing anything of what it stands for.
That's exactly
Yeah,
what I wanted to know because it just said
Um,
that you imaged the wrong person, but I don't know if it.
so
I, I
if
looked
they
it up, but
I
I don't know
think
if
it's
I'm right.
basically
Because I tried looking it up on Google and I couldn't find anything.
so a UPA is something that the clinical like the school gives you. It's kind of like, okay, you this is like your warning. You can't, you know, that what you did was not acceptable. So the clinical, I believe the clinical instructor would tell, or would it have been the prospector?
Mm-hmm.
The prospector um would either give it to you or they would let the clinical supervisor know, and then you would have to go about it that way because you did something that kind of gets you in trouble. That's what I believe that's what that is. But hopefully Sean could kind of clear that up for us.
Yeah. Like,
I got that it was because I looked it up and it said it's a part of UPA is the unfair, like an unfair practice act.
Mhm.
Mm.
So, but I could be wrong. I just looked that up today and it said
Yeah,
what Viviana just explained, but what it stood for from what I got was Unfair Practice Act.
unfair
But I
practice.
Okay.
I
That
didn't
makes
know
who
what
knows?
it stood for, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is, but hopefully
Hopefully he
Professor
can
Steele.
explain it.
Yeah, hopefully he can explain it
yeah.
so we're all on the same page. That was a good question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
None of this kind of week of the lectures I've like got a lot of questions because it wasn't like the direct or inverse relationships or anything kind of like that. I
Mhm.
feel like since it was a lot of um like patient-centered care and like attire and instructions, I didn't really have any questions, but I thought a lot of the concepts were really uh like good and effective because especially with my job right now, we work with like a lot of elderly patients. And I know for the patient instructions, when he's talking about giving like short and direct instructions and clear, um, like slow communication with
Mhm.
your patients and like the audible aspect, he mentioned that you shouldn't ever like assume at first that a patient, especially someone that's older, has like a hearing issue. And I see this a lot in my job too, is like some of my coworkers will just assume that someone's hard of hearing and then they are like shouting at them.
Yeah.
And the patient's
Mhm.
like, why are they shouting at me? Or like they have a hearing
Mhm.
aid already.
Mhm.
Um, so I just thought that was like good that that was one of the patient instructions like branched off, and then also how he said that we should develop like a script for our instructions and how we can kind of like paraphrase the same script that we're like giving to each patient similarly, like the same instructions, so it be kind of comes like muscle memory and then you make less mistakes. I thought that was like pretty
Helpful.
accurate, yeah, and
Mhm.
helpful. But yeah, I didn't really have any questions, but I feel like I resonated with a lot of the patient care and instructions and all that.
and having to confirm everything, like all of their information prior to that without like getting their information out, like in front of everybody else. That's gonna be
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing he said that I thought was helpful too is when dealing with like a special needs patient or something where you can't always just go, too far into the directions or what it is you're doing. Just go like one step at a time, like, okay, we're gonna stand up now, or like we're gonna step over here instead of being like, we're gonna take images of this or we're gonna do that, kind of thing.
just make them comfortable.
Yeah, or just kind of just be like do one little step at a time. I thought that was interesting.
For me, I think that the whole patient dose was kind of like good information, that I kind of got because it kind of tied down with the whole OID and SID that we kind of learned from last week.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is more sensitive. I mean, some stuff kind of seems a little bit like kind of like common sense, like obviously your eyes and reproductive stuff is sensitive, but it's good to know like why they make it like a high KBP and a low mass to like protect and stuff like that. So I thought actually that stuff was kind of pretty interesting, and some of it kind of combined with like this week's. But I agree, I feel like I didn't really have too many questions this week.
And Tad, to yours, I thought it was interesting that the technique, the KBP, the higher it is, the less damage it would be to the cells. So I think he said it would just, did he say like burn the cell instead of less mass, you would cause more
So-
damage to the cell?
So the less KVP you have, the more KVP you have, if you have a shorter mass, it's a shorter exposure time as to if you have like a longer mass, then you're damaging the reproductive or anything more because it's a longer exposure at a very high level. So I think that's
Yeah, I think he said it was
Yeah.
less likely to
yeah.
damage the cell and then reproducing as a
Mhm.
fat cell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested to, I think they said it's in our second semester, I
Mhm.
think, how we'll learn more about like how the radiation could make like our cells, multiply and then become
Yeah.
like cancerous and all of that.
Mhm.
Because I'm like, we all know that radiation can cause cancer, but I'm like I want to know so bad like the physiology of that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He kind of like, I think they like briefly said something in our lab last week about it, but I'm sure it's a very in-depth concept.
Mhm. Agree.
I did also think it was interesting when he was talking about all of the hazards that are in the room, and he
Oh,
said
yeah.
listing all of them. I was like, oh my gosh, that's like a lot to look out for. And
Yeah.
the bucky being raised too fast, or the stool when you're moving the table, and
The stool, and then he said like an oxygen tank he had at
Yeah.
some point. I'm like, oh gosh.
the patient can like get their fingers pinched or something. I was like, oh my god, it's a lot
Well,
to
I think because he said it lifts like 400 pounds or whatever, but it'll also will like crush down on 400 pounds.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, it's like one of those like hyper like metal presses. I don't know if you guys have seen them where it can like, yeah, he said like crush the stool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
No
like,
pressure, right?
yeah, that's another fear added.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this week was pretty straightforward
Mhm.
and more like information that was like helpful to us in the long run, but less questions. Just good. Does anybody else have anything that they want to add?
I would just like to say that the HIPAA videos he had us watch, I felt like they were really helpful in understanding how not to violate a patient's what's the word I'm looking for?
Privacy.
Privacy, yes.
Yeah.
That's the word.
Yeah, and how you have to be like really careful.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have nothing to do with like a patient care, you can't even like dive into their chart or look into any of their like medical history because that's like a violation. So I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, especially there was one in the video where a nurse, I think, saw someone that was famous, but she didn't specify. But then it's like on her Facebook page, it shows where she works and where
Oh,
the
man.
friend works. And I was like, oh my God, like I didn't even think
Just
about
dropped
that.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it. Not that I would do it, but like it just didn't come to
Yeah.
my mind.
Yeah.
Like,
I feel like you have to be just like overly
yeah.
cautious. Like you
Mhm.
just have to not say anything about anything. I'm like,
Refrain. Yeah.
Mhm.
that's another like pressure aspect, but
Yeah.
I think you get used to it as the time comes. You're in your like work world, and then once you come out, it's like everything is very confidential.
Yeah.
Mhm. No, I agree. I think it's something, all this stuff is kind of things that we'll kind of learn more as we go in the clinical site, as we see other people and just start doing things ourselves.
All right. Is everyone good? You want to add anything else?
I feel
I'm-
fine.
I'm good. I feel
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Better this week than
Okay.
last
I
week.
Yeah.
know.
I
Just
think the UPA was the only thing that
Mhm.
that we all collectively were.
yeah.
Yeah. You should ask him in class.
Yeah, just to
Yeah,
make sure.
because I don't the unfair practice to become be
It would make
completely
sense.
wrong.
That's what it
It could be
was.
completely
It
different.
feels,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like that could be right.
Yeah. So
I
I'd
had
rather
to,
be
I had to
sure.
search high and low for that in the internet though, so I'm like, I don't really know if that's
Mhm.
even accurate.
Yeah.
You just
Well,
never know.
we'll
We
come
can
back
ask him in
next
lab.
week and we'll come back and talk about it next week.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So I just have a last question. So is the soft tissue dose just the radiation exposure? Is that the same thing?
Well,
The
because
soft
there's soft
tissue
tissue and there's
dose.
also like bones and stuff. Wouldn't those be two different types of
Mhm.
things in our body?
Yeah.
So maybe it's
Mhm.
two different things, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was really confused on when he
Yeah.
uses soft tissue dose.
Mhm.
Was he talking about like a density? I don't think I have watched that video yet.
I think he just said if you increase the SID, you can decrease the patient tissue dose. I don't know if I wrote that
I
correctly.
think it's like what enters the tissue.
Or the higher KBP can help reduce patient dose.
I think he
I was
just
just
means because
confused
of
with
the
the soft
mass.
tissue.
Because when you have a higher KVP, you normally use a shorter mass, as when you have a low KVP, you use a higher mass. I think that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, I was really confused on
Mm.
those.
Was that on that was on the slides, right?
On his lecture, yeah. I think it was the
Are you
last one.
talking
I think
about
that, yeah, that was the one I
reducing
did. I
patient
haven't watched
dose?
yet.
Yeah, technique, the higher KVP, the less mass you use. Um,
Yeah, I did see that, but I was just confused with the soft tissue dose. What it was, if it was the same thing.
yeah, I thought. I don't know, maybe he can
Maybe it
explain
has to
that
do
part.
with like the certain thickness of the soft tissue in comparison to like bones and stuff, having to use like different technique
Mhm.
to like limit the exposure level
Hmm.
because it's a different like thickness. But I'm not sure. That's the last video that I think I haven't watched.
Yeah, I haven't watched that one either.
I'm sure it'll make more sense in lab.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was also on the last weeks also where he made us do the chart with the mass and the IR exposure being directly proportional to soft tissue dose. I was just always confused with soft tissue.
I think the soft tissue
I think it just
had
has to
more
do
like
with the
optical
tissue.
density in it. Like it was more black when he talked about it. And when he showed us the picture in last week's lecture, it showed up more black because it had higher radiation, but he might
Mhm.
be talking about something else this week. I have to watch the video.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I probably would have been more help.
Mm.
Anyone else have anything more? No,
No, I think that was all.
I think we're all good. All right. Well,
All
thank
right.
you, everyone.
We'll see you guys next week, and
We'll
then
see
some
you
of
all
you in
next
my
week.
lab.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me pause.